Camille Hampton learned early that excellence isn't always enough when your skin tells a story people refuse to see. 7 interviews. 7 polite rejections disguised as aesthetic concerns. What she wouldn't have known, was that in exactly 43 hours, 67 seconds of her dancing in the rain would change everything. The interview room smelled like expensive leather and quiet judgment. Camille Hampton sat perfectly still, her resume, printed on cream-colored paper, first-class honors in bold, spread between them like evidence at a trial. The hiring manager's eyes kept drifting. Not to her qualifications, not to her experience, to her hands, her neck, the places where her skin told a story she hadn't asked to write. "You're clearly talented, Miss Hampton," the woman said, her voice wrapped in the kind of politeness that cuts deeper than cruelty. "But our brand has a very specific aesthetic. We need someone who fits our visual identity." Camille's stomach twisted. She recognized this script. She'd heard 6 variations of it already this month. "I understand Korean business culture," Camille said, keeping her voice level even as her throat tightened. "I spent 4 years here during university. I'm fluent in Korean. My thesis on cross-cultural marketing strategies was published in. It's not about qualifications." The woman's smile never wavered, and somehow that made it worse. "It's about representation. Our clients expect a certain consistency." 7 interviews. 7 elegantly phrased rejections. 7 different ways of saying her skin, the patches of lighter melanin that mapped across her brown complexion like continents she hadn't chosen, made her unsuitable for professional visibility. Camille gathered her papers with steady hands. Years of practice had taught her not to shake, not to let them see the fracture spreading through her chest. "Thank you for your time." She walked out of that glass building into the aggressive afternoon heat of Seoul's Gangnam district, and the city swallowed her immediately. Businessmen in identical navy suits rushed past, their shoulders occasionally bumping hers without apology or acknowledgement. The subway station exhaled warm air that smelled like bodies and electricity. Somewhere nearby, a street vendor called out in rapid Korean, selling hotdog to the lunchtime crowd. Camille descended into the subway, let the crowd carry her toward line 2. Her reflection flickered in the train windows. A woman in a carefully pressed blouse and slacks, makeup applied with precision, hair pulled back in a neat bun. Professional, polished, apparently still not enough. Her phone buzzed. Her mother, calling from Virginia where it was probably sometime past midnight. "Hi, Mama," Camille answered, forcing brightness into her voice. "Don't hi Mama me with that fake cheerful tone." "How did it go?" Camille's throat closed. Her mother always knew. "They said I was overqualified," Camille whispered, because the train was packed and she didn't want strangers witnessing her unraveling. "Which is just another way of saying." "I know what it's another way of saying." Her mother's voice carried steel wrapped in softness. "And I need you to hear me right now, baby. Their blindness is not your flaw. I know that." Camille pressed her forehead against the cool metal pole, closed her eyes. "I know that intellectually. But Mama, I'm so tired. I graduated top of my class. I speak 3 languages. I have everything they say they want, and it's still not." "You are enough," her mother interrupted. "You were enough the day you were born, and you're enough right now on that crowded train feeling like the world is trying to break you. You hear me?" Camille nodded, even though her mother couldn't see her. "I hear you. Good. Now go home. Rest. Tomorrow's a new day." But tomorrow wasn't a new day. Tomorrow was the same day wearing different clothes, and Camille was running out of ways to pretend otherwise. She emerged from the subway near her apartment in Mapogu, a neighborhood that hummed with a different energy than Gangnam's corporate sterility. Here, small restaurants crowded next to vintage clothing shops. Street art decorated walls that in wealthier districts would have been pristine and blank. Students from nearby universities sat on stoops, eating gimbap and arguing passionately about music, politics, philosophy. Across from her apartment building stood a small restaurant with a crooked sign that read Song's Kitchen, in both Korean and English. Through the window, Camille could see Mrs. Song wiping down tables, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, her face creased with the kind of wrinkles that came from smiling more than frowning. Mrs. Song had lived in the apartment across from Camille for 2 years now. She'd heard about Camille's job search struggles during one of their hallway conversations, the kind that started with borrowed eggs and ended with shared histories. 3 weeks ago, when Camille had come home crying after her 4th rejection, Mrs. Song had offered her a job waitressing at her restaurant. "It's not what you studied for," Mrs. Song had said, her Korean gentle and grandmotherly. "But it's honest work, and I could use someone who understands both cultures. The pay isn't much, but you'll eat well, and nobody here will make you feel small." Camille had accepted, because her savings were evaporating and pride couldn't pay rent. Now she pushed through the restaurant's door, and the smell of kimchi jjigae and grilled mackerel wrapped around her like a familiar embrace. "You're early," Mrs. Song called from behind the counter, where she was prepping vegetables with practiced efficiency. "Your shift doesn't start for another hour." "Interview ended quickly," Camille said, hanging her bag on the hook near the kitchen entrance. Mrs. Song's knife paused. She looked up, her dark eyes reading everything Camille wasn't saying. Same answer, different words, same meaning. Mrs. Song set down her knife and wiped her hands on her apron. She walked around the counter and pulled Camille into a hug that smelled like ginger and sesame oil. "Their loss," she said simply. "Now go change. We've got the dinner rush coming, and I need your smile to charm the college students who never tip enough." Camille changed in the tiny bathroom, trading her interview clothes for the restaurant's uniform, a simple black shirt and dark jeans. She tied an apron around her waist, washed her face clean of the careful makeup, and stared at her reflection. The vitiligo spread across her skin in patterns that had no logic, no symmetry. Patches of lighter brown on her hands, creeping up her forearms. A splash across her left cheek, another on her neck. Her mother said it looked like she'd been kissed by moonlight. Doctors said it was an autoimmune condition where her melanocytes stopped producing pigment. Employers said it was a liability. She didn't know what she thought anymore. Some days she loved the uniqueness of it, the way it made her unmistakably herself. Other days she wanted to hide, to blend in, to stop being a walking conversation starter. The dinner shift started slow but built steadily. University students claimed the corner tables, spreading textbooks and laptops across surfaces while nursing single cups of coffee for hours. A group of office workers stumbled in around 7, loud and loosened from after-work soju. Camille moved between tables with practiced ease, her Korean flowing naturally as she took orders, recommended dishes, laughed at bad jokes. But there was a table near the window, 3 women in their 30s, designer handbags hooked over their chair backs, who watched her with the kind of interest that made her skin prickle. She approached with menus and water. "Welcome. What can I get started for you?" One of the women stared openly at Camille's hands as she set down the glasses. "What's wrong with your skin?" The question landed like a slap. Camille's smile held, muscle memory keeping it in place. "It's vitiligo. It's just a pigmentation condition. Now, can I recommend the bulgogi? It's exceptional tonight." "Is it contagious?" Another woman asked, genuine concern pinching her features. "No," Camille said, her voice still pleasant, still professional. "Completely harmless. Would you like a few minutes to look at the menu?" "We'll go somewhere else," the first woman said, standing abruptly. "Somewhere more sanitary." They left, just walked out, their heels clicking against the floor like accusations. The restaurant went quiet. Other customers had heard. Some looked away quickly, embarrassed to have witnessed the cruelty. Others stared with open curiosity, probably wondering if the woman had been right to be concerned. Camille stood there, empty water glasses still in her hands, and felt something inside her crack. Mrs. Song appeared at her elbow. "Go take your break early. 15 minutes. I'll handle the floor." Camille nodded, not trusting her voice. She walked to the small break room behind the kitchen, sat on the worn couch and let herself shake. Not cry. She'd learned that crying at work was a luxury she couldn't afford. But shake, releasing the tension that had been building since that morning's interview. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. Just remember, you're not trying to fit into their world. You're building your own. Love you, baby. Camille typed back. Love you too. She had 10 minutes left on her break. She closed her eyes, breathed deeply, and rebuilt the armor she needed to get through the rest of her shift. Because tomorrow she'd wake up and do this again. And the day after that. And the day after that. Until something changed. Or until she broke. Whichever came first. The rest of the shift passed in a blur of forced smiles and careful movements. Camille kept her hands busy, her mind quiet, her face arranged in the expression of pleasant efficiency that customers expected. But underneath, something was shifting. Some foundation she'd been standing on had started to crumble, and she didn't know how much longer she could keep her balance. By the time Mrs. Song flipped the sign to closed at 10:30, Camille's jaw ached from clenching. You did well tonight, Mrs. Song said, counting out the register. Especially after those horrible women. You have strength, Camille. More than you know. Camille untied her apron, folded it with mechanical precision. Sometimes I don't want to be strong. Sometimes I just want to be allowed to exist without it being a whole thing. Mrs. Song looked up from the cash drawer, her expression soft with understanding. I know, dear. I know. Camille collected her things, said good night, and stepped out into the Seoul night. The air had cooled, carrying the scent of street food from late-night vendors and the distant smell of rain. The sky hung low and heavy, clouds blocking out the stars that never showed themselves in the city anyway. She should have gone home, should have climbed the stairs to her small apartment, taken a hot shower, called her mother, slept. Should have prepared herself for another day of job applications and rejections and the exhausting work of pretending none of it touched her. Instead, her feet carried her toward Gangnam Station. There was a spot near Exit 7 where street performers gathered. Musicians, dancers, artists who turned the sidewalk into their stage. Camille had passed it hundreds of times, had stopped occasionally to watch, to drop coins into open guitar cases. She'd never performed there herself, even though dancing was the thing she did in her apartment when the walls felt too close, when her body needed to say things her mouth couldn't. Tonight, something pulled her there with the insistence of instinct. The area was less crowded than usual, just scattered groups of young people migrating between bars and clubs. A lone guitarist sat on a plastic crate, his instrument case open at his feet, playing something melancholic and unnamed. The melody drifted through the air like smoke, curling around lampposts and bus stops, finding its way into Camille's chest. She stood at the edge of the performance space, listening. The guitarist's fingers moved across strings with the kind of muscle memory that came from years of practice, years of turning feeling into sound. His eyes were closed. He wasn't performing for the sparse crowd. He was releasing something, exorcising it through music. Camille understood that. God, did she understand that? The first drops of rain began to fall light, hesitant, like the sky testing whether anyone would notice. The guitarist kept playing. The few people lingering nearby pulled out umbrellas or ducked into covered areas. But Camille stepped forward, into the open space in front of the musician, and she started to move. It wasn't choreographed, wasn't planned. Her body simply responded to the music the way lungs respond to air. She closed her eyes and let herself feel everything she'd been holding back. The humiliation of that morning's interview, the sting of those women's comments at the restaurant, the bone-deep exhaustion of being judged for something she couldn't control and wouldn't change even if she could. Her arms lifted, her spine curved, her feet found rhythm in the concrete. The rain fell harder, soaking through her shirt, plastering her hair against her neck. Water ran down her face, and she couldn't tell if she was crying or if it was just the rain, and it didn't matter because nobody could see the difference anyway. The music swelled, and Camille spun, her movements sharp where the emotion was angry, fluid where it was grief, explosive where it was defiance. She danced like she was shedding skin, like she was becoming something new, like she was burning down and rebuilding simultaneously. She didn't notice the people stopping to watch, didn't see the phones coming out, the recording starting, didn't hear the murmurs of appreciation or surprise. She was somewhere beyond awareness, in that space where nothing exists except body and music and the raw truth of feeling. The guitarist transitioned into something faster, more urgent, and Camille matched him. Her feet struck puddles, sending up small splashes. Her hands cut through rain like blades. She leaped, landed, twisted, released. Every rejection became movement. Every insult became rhythm. Every moment of having to smile through pain became this, honest, unfiltered, undeniable. The song built to a crescendo, and so did Camille. She threw everything she had into the final sequence, her body speaking in a language more truthful than words could ever be. When the guitarist struck the final chord, Camille froze in position. Arms extended, head thrown back, chest heaving, rain streaming down her face and neck and the places where her skin told its patchwork story. For a moment, there was only the sound of rain hitting pavement. Then applause broke out. Not polite, scattered clapping, but genuine appreciation. Camille opened her eyes, suddenly aware of the crowd that had gathered. 20, maybe 30 people, some sheltered under umbrellas, others standing in the rain like her, all of them looking at her with something that felt dangerously close to recognition. Her cheeks burned. She wasn't a performer. This wasn't meant to be a show. This was supposed to be private, even though she'd done it in public. Personal, even though strangers had witnessed it. The guitarist smiled at her, nodding his approval. Someone called out, "Beautiful," in Korean. A teenage girl approached, holding out a handful of $1 bills. "No," Camille said quickly, shaking her head. "No, I wasn't. I'm not." But the girl insisted, pressing the money into Camille's hand before running back to her friends, who were all staring at their phones, whispering excitedly. Camille looked down at the wet bills, then at the crowd beginning to disperse now that the moment had passed. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Her clothes clung to her body. Her hair had come completely loose from its bun. She felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with the rain-soaked clothing and everything to do with having revealed something true in front of strangers. She needed to leave, needed to go home, needed to process whatever had just happened in the privacy of her own space. She mumbled thanks to the guitarist, who gave her a knowing look, one artist to another, and then she walked quickly toward the subway entrance. The rain had intensified into a proper downpour now, and the streets reflected neon signs in rippling colors. Camille descended into the fluorescent brightness of the station, water dripping from her clothes, leaving a trail behind her. The late-night train was nearly empty. Camille sat in the corner, hugging herself, watching her reflection in the dark window across from her. She looked wild, undone, more herself than she'd looked in months of careful professional presentation. Her phone buzzed. A text from a former university classmate. "Girl, are you seeing this? You're blowing up online." Camille frowned, opened her social media. Her notifications had exploded. Hundreds of tags, mentions, shares. Her stomach dropped as she realized what had happened. Someone, multiple someones, had filmed her dancing. The videos were spreading with viral velocity across Korean social media platforms, already jumping to international sites. She scrolled through shaking hands, watching herself from angles she hadn't known existed. The rain, the movement, the visibility of her vitiligo under the streetlights, the contrast of light and dark skin made more pronounced by water and illumination. The comments were in Korean, English, Spanish, Japanese. Most were positive, people calling her beautiful, powerful, inspiring. But others dissected her appearance with clinical detachment, debated whether her skin condition was real or makeup, argued about whether she should be celebrated or pitted. Camille closed the apps, shoved her phone in her pocket. Her hands were shaking again, but this time not from emotion, from adrenaline, from fear, from the sudden, vertiginous feeling of being seen by thousands of eyes when she'd spent months being told she was too visible, too different, too much. She got off at her stop, climbed the stairs to street level, walked the 3 blocks to her building in a daze. The rain had eased to a drizzle. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. A delivery scooter buzzed past, its headlight cutting through the darkness. Mrs. Song's restaurant was dark, closed for the night. Camille's apartment building looked the same as always. Tired, unremarkable home. She climbed the 4 flights to her floor, unlocked her door, stepped into the small space that contained her entire life in Seoul. She dropped her bag, peeled off her wet clothes, stood in her tiny bathroom under hot water that never quite got hot enough. She watched the water circle the drain and tried to make sense of what she felt. Not regret exactly, not shame, but something complicated and unwieldy, something between exposure and liberation. She dried off, pulled on soft pajamas, and sat on her bed with her phone. The videos kept multiplying. Someone had created a hashtag. Dance studios were sharing it. A few minor celebrities had commented. The view count was climbing into the hundreds of thousands. Camille lay back against her pillows and stared at the ceiling, listening to the rain against her window. Tomorrow she'd have to face this. Tomorrow she'd have to figure out what it meant that her most vulnerable moment had become public consumption. Tomorrow she'd have to be strong again. But tonight, in the quiet of her apartment, she let herself feel the strange mixture of terror and wonder that came from being truly, completely seen. 7,000 miles away, in a glass tower overlooking Manhattan, Andre Kim was watching his company die in real time. The 42nd floor conference room had the kind of view that reminded people why they'd sold pieces of their soul for success. The city sprawled below like a circuit board of ambition, lights stretching to horizons that promised anything was possible if you wanted it badly enough. Andre had stopped believing in promises 3 quarters ago. The numbers don't lie, his CFO was saying, her voice carrying the practiced neutrality of someone delivering bad news to powerful people. We're down 18% year over year. Our major clients are moving to competitors who are taking creative risks we're not willing to take. Andre sat at the head of the table, his posture perfect despite the exhaustion pressing against his spine. Around him, 12 executives shifted in their chairs, exchanged glances, waited for him to perform the miracle of leadership they'd come to expect. He had nothing. Our fall campaign performed adequately, the creative director offered, his tone suggesting adequately was the new catastrophic. But adequate doesn't move markets anymore. We're getting feedback that our content feels soulless, Andre finished, his voice cutting through the corporate euphemisms. You can say it. We're producing beautiful, empty, forgettable work that could come from any agency in any city. We've become exactly what the industry has always been, predictable. Silence settled over the room like dust. So what do you want us to do differently? His COO asked, genuine frustration bleeding through professionalism. We've tried edgy. We've tried diverse casting. We've tried everything the market research says audiences want. Nothing's working. Because market research can't tell you how to bottle authenticity, Andre thought. Because we're trying to manufacture what can only be found. Sir, if we don't turn this around in the next 2 quarters, the CFO started. I know what happens, Andre interrupted. I've seen the projections. I understand the stakes. He stood, the movement sharp enough to silence whatever his team had been about to say next. Meeting adjourned. I need to think. They filed out with the hushed urgency of people who suspected the ship was sinking but didn't want to be the first to say it out loud. Andre stayed behind, standing at the window watching New York pretend it never slept. His father had built this company from nothing. Immigrant story, American dream, all the narratives that sounded inspiring in retrospect but had been brutal and lonely in reality. Andre had inherited it at 25, convinced he could honor the legacy by making it bigger, faster, more successful. Instead, he'd made it hollow. His phone sat on the conference table, dark and silent. He should call his board, update them on the meeting, spin the numbers into something less catastrophic. Should review the next quarter's campaigns, approve budgets, make decisions that affected hundreds of employees who trusted him to keep the company alive. Instead, he picked up his phone and opened social media, scrolling mindlessly through content that all looked the same. Polished, pretty, forgettable. His thumb moved on autopilot, pausing occasionally on something that almost caught his attention before continuing. Fashion campaigns, influencer content, dance videos, makeup tutorials. The endless scroll of human beings trying to be noticed by other human beings who were also trying to be noticed. Then his thumb stopped. The video was grainy, shot on someone's phone in low light and rain. The algorithm had probably surfaced it because of the Korean location tags and the dance content he sometimes watched. But this wasn't like anything else in his feed. A woman, black, athletic build, completely soaked, was dancing in the rain on what looked like a Seoul street corner. The camera work was amateur, shaky, but it didn't matter because the movement was absolutely arresting. Sharp and fluid and raw in a way that professional choreography never was. Like watching someone bleed through motion instead of words. Andre's finger hovered over the scroll, but he couldn't move past it. The streetlights caught the rain and the woman's skin in ways that created almost abstract patterns. Darker and lighter areas that he first thought were shadows and light before realizing they were her actual complexion. Vitiligo his brain supplied. He'd seen models with it before, carefully photographed to make the condition look intentional and aesthetic. This wasn't that. This was someone dancing like the world was ending, and this was her last chance to mean something. Her face was tilted up toward the rain, eyes closed, expression somewhere between agony and ecstasy. Her clothes clung to her body. Her hair had come completely loose, and she looked absolutely, devastatingly real. The video was 67 seconds long. Andre watched it again, then again. By the fourth viewing, he'd sat down, elbows on the conference table, phone held in both hands like something precious. This was what he'd been trying to articulate in that meeting. This unfiltered, honest, impossible to manufacture authenticity. This woman wasn't performing beauty. She was being beautiful because she'd forgotten to care whether anyone was watching. He checked the comments, already thousands of them in multiple languages. People calling her inspiring. Others debating her skin condition. Some criticizing the quality of the video, missing the entire point that the raw footage was part of what made it powerful. Andre scrolled to the original poster's account, but it wasn't the dancer's page. Just someone who'd been there, filmed it, shared it. The comments were trying to identify her. Someone claimed she was a university student. Another said she worked at a restaurant in Mapogu. Nobody seemed to actually know. He opened a new tab and started searching Seoul dancer Rain Vitiligo in various combinations. The video had been uploaded 3 hours ago and was already spreading across platforms. Korean entertainment blogs were picking it up. Dance studios were sharing it. It was going viral in real time. Andre watched the video again, studying her movement with the analytical eye he'd trained on thousands of models over the years. She had no formal training. He could see that in the way she moved. But she had something infinitely more valuable than technique. She had truth. His creative director's words echoed. We're producing beautiful, empty, forgettable work. This woman was the opposite of forgettable. Andre checked the time, 11:47 p.m. in New York, which made it nearly 1 p.m. the next day in Seoul. He opened his calendar, scanned the next week's obligations. Board meetings, investor calls, campaign approvals, the entire machinery of a dying company demanding his attention. He canceled everything. His assistant answered on the second ring, her voice alert despite the late hour. Mr. Kim, is everything okay? I need you to book me on the next available flight to Seoul, Andre said, still watching the video loop. First class, direct if possible. And I need a car service arranged from Incheon, hotel accommodations, open-ended return. When were you thinking of traveling? Tomorrow. Today, actually. Whatever the earliest departure is. A pause. Sir, you have the board presentation on Thursday. The investor meeting Friday. Reschedule them. All of them. Everything. Tell them a critical business opportunity has emerged that requires immediate attention. It wasn't a lie. This was the most critical opportunity he'd had in years. Even if he couldn't yet explain why his entire instinct was screaming that this rain-soaked dancer was the answer to problems he'd been trying to solve with spreadsheets and focus groups. May I ask what this is regarding? Andre took a screenshot of the video, texted it to her. I need you to find this woman. She's in Seoul, probably works at a restaurant somewhere in Mapogu based on the comments. Use whatever resources necessary. Hire a local investigator if you need to. I want a name and location before I land. Another pause, longer this time. His assistant had worked for him for 6 years. She knew when to ask questions and when to simply execute. Consider it done. I'll have your itinerary within the hour. After he hung up, Andre stood and walked back to the window. Manhattan glittered below, all those ambitions stacked in glass and steel, and he wondered how many of them were as lost as he'd been. How many were producing empty perfection while somewhere, on a rain-soaked Seoul street, someone was dancing like truth looked when it finally escaped. He pulled up the video one more time. 67 seconds. That's all it had taken to show him exactly what his company, what the entire industry, had been missing. Not more polish. Not better market research. Not safer decisions. Raw, unfiltered humanity. He screenshotted several frames, her mid-leap, her face tilted to the rain, her hands cutting through water and air with equal conviction. Sent them to his creative director with a single message. This is what we've been trying to find. I'm going to Seoul to offer her a contract. Start thinking about how we build a campaign around real. The response came back within minutes. Is this a joke? Dead serious. Cancel the fall lineup. We're starting over. Andre gathered his things and left the conference room, left the building, left behind the careful corporate world that had stopped making sense somewhere along the way. His driver took him to his penthouse, where he threw clothes into a bag with uncharacteristic carelessness, trying to remember the last time he'd made a decision this impulsive. He couldn't. Every major choice of his adult life had been calculated, researched, approved by committees and boards and people whose job it was to minimize risk. He'd built his father's company into an international presence by being smart and careful and strategic. And he'd almost destroyed it by forgetting that sometimes the most strategic thing you can do is follow your instinct off a cliff and trust you'll figure out how to fly on the way down. His phone buzzed. His assistant. Flight confirmed. Departs JFK 2:15 p.m. Arrives ICN 5:40 p.m. next day local time. I'll have more information on the dancer by the time you land. Andre looked at the screenshot on his phone one more time. This woman frozen mid-movement, rain and light and complete abandonment to the moment. He didn't know her name yet. Didn't know if she'd even agree to meet with him, let alone sign a contract that would put her face on billboards across 3 continents. But he knew, with the kind of certainty that bypassed logic entirely, that his company's survival depended on finding her. That the answer to manufactured perfection was honest imperfection. That 67 seconds of rain-soaked dancing had just changed the trajectory of his entire life. He set an alarm for 6 hours from now and tried to sleep, but his mind kept returning to that video. To the way she moved like someone who'd stopped caring what the world thought and discovered freedom in that surrender. By the time his alarm went off, the video had 5 million views and climbing. By the time his plane took off, it had 15 million. By the time he landed in Seoul 30 hours after first seeing her dance, Camille Hampton had become an international viral sensation, and Andre Kim had a name, a workplace, and a plan to offer her something that would either save them both or prove that even calculated risk was still just risk. Camille woke to her phone vibrating itself toward the edge of her nightstand. Sunlight cut through the gaps in her curtains, sharp and insistent. For a moment, she existed in that blissful space between sleep and waking, where yesterday's chaos hadn't quite solidified into today's reality. Then she reached for her phone, and the illusion shattered. 63 missed calls. 214 text messages. Her email inbox had exceeded its notification limit. Every social media platform screamed for her attention with numbers that didn't make sense. Thousands of new followers, tens of thousands of interactions, messages in languages she couldn't read and some she could. Her mother had called 7 times. Camille sat up, her heart already racing, and called her back. "Baby, are you okay?" Her mother answered on the first ring, voice tight with worry. "I've been trying to reach you for hours. Why didn't you tell me you were?" "Mama, slow down. What are you?" "You're everywhere, Camille. Everywhere. That dance video, it's on the news here. The actual news. They're calling you the Seoul Rain Dancer and talking about vitiligo awareness and... Baby, do you understand what's happening?" Camille's hands started shaking. It was just a moment. I was just dancing. I didn't mean for anyone to. I know you didn't, but it happened. And now you need to decide what you're going to do about it. After she hung up, Camille spent 20 minutes scrolling through the viral spread of her own vulnerability. News outlets had picked up the story. Think pieces were being written about representation and beauty standards. Someone had tracked down her university thesis and was sharing excerpts. A major Korean entertainment blog had published a frame-by-frame analysis of her technique, calling her movement raw authenticity in an age of manufactured perfection. The exposure felt like standing naked in a crowded room, except the room was the entire internet and she couldn't find her clothes. Her shift at the restaurant started in 2 hours. She showered, dressed, tried to eat breakfast but managed only coffee. When she stepped outside, she half expected cameras, reporters, something cinematic and overwhelming. But her neighborhood looked exactly the same. The ajumma at the corner store arranging produce, the high school students walking to Saturday Academy, the stray cat that lived near the dumpster. Normal. Everything was still normal here. Mrs. Song was setting up the restaurant when Camille arrived. The older woman took one look at her face and immediately pulled her into the kitchen. I saw, Mrs. Song said simply. The whole neighborhood has seen. My grandson sent me the video at 6 this morning. I'm sorry if this brings weird attention to the restaurant. I didn't mean. Sorry. Mrs. Song gripped Camille's shoulders, her touch firm and grounding. Child, you have nothing to apologize for. You danced. You were beautiful. You were honest. The world responded. That's not something to apologize for. But what if people come here looking for me? What if? Then they'll come. And they'll eat good food. And maybe they'll learn that you're a person, not just a viral moment. Mrs. Song squeezed once, then released her. Now prep the banchan. The lunch crowd won't care about your internet fame if their kimchi isn't fresh. The work helped. Camille fell into the familiar rhythm of restaurant preparation, letting her hands stay busy while her mind tried to process the impossible reality of being known by strangers. A few customers mentioned recognizing her, asked for photos, which she politely declined. Most people just wanted their food. But around 2 in the afternoon, the restaurant door opened and the energy in the room shifted. The man who walked in didn't belong in Mrs. Song's humble establishment. Everything about him screamed expensive. The perfectly tailored black coat despite the mild weather, the watch that caught light like a threat, the way he moved through space as if gravity affected him differently than it affected ordinary people. His hair fell in that calculated, disheveled style that looked careless but required significant effort to achieve. He was Korean, probably early 30s, with the kind of face that fashion magazines put on covers. Sharp jawline, intense eyes, the posture of someone who'd never doubted his right to enter any room he chose. He scanned the restaurant with a gaze that seemed to catalog and dismiss simultaneously, until his eyes landed on Camille. Recognition flashed across his features. He walked directly toward her. Camille Hampton, he said. Not a question. A statement in English, his accent more American than Korean despite his features. Camille's grip tightened on the water pitcher she was holding. Can I help you? I need to speak with you. Privately. Every instinct told her to refuse, to maintain the boundary between her viral moment and her real life. But something in his directness, the lack of pretense or fanfare, made her curious despite herself. I'm working. I'll wait. And he did. He sat at a corner table, ordered nothing but water, and watched her work for the next hour with the patience of someone accustomed to getting what he wanted through sheer persistence. When her shift ended, Mrs. Song gave her an encouraging nod. Camille untied her apron and sat across from the stranger who somehow knew her name. Who are you? She asked. Andre Kim. I own a modeling agency based in New York, with branches in Seoul, Paris, and Milan. Camille's defenses snapped into place immediately. I'm not interested in modeling. I know. You graduated with honors in international business and cross-cultural communications. You've been rejected from 7 positions in the past 3 months, all of them citing concerns about brand image or client relations. You're overqualified for every job that's turned you down. and you're currently waitressing because the world is unfair and wasteful of talent. The invasion of her privacy should have made her angry. Instead, she felt oddly seen. You researched me. I watched you dance in the rain for approximately 67 seconds, and I've spent the last 18 hours learning everything I could about you. My company is failing, Miss Hampton. We're losing ground to competitors because we've become exactly what the industry has always been, manufactured, hollow, obsessed with narrow definitions of beauty that alienate more people than they attract. He leaned forward, his intensity focused like a laser. I need someone real, someone whose presence challenges assumptions, someone who moves the way you moved in that video, like truth feels when it's been held back too long. So you flew to Seoul to offer me, what? A modeling contract. Camille couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice. Let me guess. You want to parade my vitiligo around as your diversity token. Make yourself look progressive while exploiting the thing that makes me unemployable everywhere else. I want to make you the face of my entire rebrand, Andre said, his voice cutting through her cynicism with simple directness. Not the diversity hire, not the special feature, the face, the vision, the standard we build around. Why should I believe you? Because I'm not asking you to fit into something that already exists. I'm asking you to help me build something new. And because I'm offering you creative control, profit participation, and the kind of platform that turns invisible people into undeniable ones. Camille stared at him, trying to find the angle, the exploitation, the inevitable disappointment. I've spent months being told I'm not right for professional visibility, that my appearance is a liability, that I need to be less obvious. Those people were idiots protecting a dying system. Andre pulled out his phone, swiped through several screens, then turned it toward her. This is my company's stock value over the past 2 years. We're hemorrhaging relevance because we're boring, predictable, forgettable. You're none of those things. The graph showed a steady decline that would alarm any business owner. Camille understood numbers, understood market trends. She also understood desperation. So I'm your Hail Mary, she said. Your last-ditch attempt to save your failing company. Yes, his honesty surprised her. But that doesn't make the opportunity less real. I need you. My company needs you. But I think you need this too, even if you don't trust it yet. I don't know you. I don't trust you. And I definitely don't trust an industry that's built on making people feel inadequate so they'll buy products they don't need. Good, Andre said. I don't want someone naive. I want someone who sees clearly and chooses anyway. Think about it. I'm staying in Seoul for the next week. Here's my contact information. He slid a business card across the table. Thick stock, minimalist design, probably cost more than her dinner. Then he stood, gave her a slight nod that might have been respect, and walked out of the restaurant with the same purposeful energy he'd brought in. Camille sat there, holding his card, feeling like the ground had shifted beneath her feet again. Mrs. Song appeared at her elbow with tea. Well, I don't know, Camille admitted. It feels too convenient, too perfectly timed. Or maybe, Mrs. Song said gently, the universe finally decided to pay attention. Camille didn't sleep that night. She lay in her small bed, staring at the ceiling while her mind ran circles around itself. Andre Kim's business card sat on her nightstand, and she kept reaching for her phone, pulling up his company's website, reading about campaigns and models and the carefully curated world of high fashion. Everything looked pristine, professional, exactly the kind of polished perfection that had rejected her repeatedly. By 3 a.m, she'd researched him thoroughly. Andre Kim, 32, took over his late father's struggling modeling agency at 25 and built it into an international presence within 4 years. Known for his calculating business decisions and his emotional detachment. Articles described him as brilliant but cold, someone who saw people as assets rather than humans. The internet had opinions about him. Some called him visionary, others called him ruthless. Fashion blogs praised his early work for its innovation, criticized his recent campaigns for playing it safe. Financial publications noted his company's declining relevance with clinical precision. He wasn't lying about needing her. The question was whether she could trust his need to translate into anything good for her. She called her mother at dawn, when it would be evening in Virginia. "He wants to make you the face of his company," her mother repeated slowly, processing. "The entire face, not just a campaign. That's what he said. And you told him no." "I told him I'd think about it." Camille pulled her knees to her chest, phone pressed against her ear. "Mama, what if this is just another way to be used? What if he's fetishizing my vitiligo, turning it into a commodity? What if he's not?" her mother countered. "What if this is exactly what you've been working toward, just arriving in a package you didn't expect?" "I don't trust it. I don't trust him." "You don't have to trust him to consider the opportunity. You just have to trust yourself to recognize exploitation when you see it." Her mother's voice softened. "Baby, you've been playing small because the world demanded it. Maybe it's time to see what happens when you take up space." After they hung up, Camille made coffee and watched Seoul wake up through her window. Delivery trucks rumbled past. The corner store owner swept his sidewalk. A group of elderly women walked toward the park for their morning exercises, their voices carrying in the cool air. Normal life continuing regardless of her crisis. Her phone buzzed. A message from Andre. "The offer stands. No pressure. But I'd like to show you what I'm envisioning. Dinner tonight if you're willing." She stared at the message for 5 full minutes before responding. "Where?" He sent her an address in Itaewon, a restaurant she'd never been to but had heard about. The kind of place where reservations required weeks of advance notice and the menu didn't list prices. Camille spent the afternoon at the restaurant helping Mrs. Song with inventory, trying to stay grounded in the physical work of counting supplies and organizing storage. But her mind kept drifting to the evening ahead, to the decision looming like weather she couldn't predict. "You're going to meet him," Mrs. Song said, not a question. "How did you? You've checked your phone 40 times in the past hour. And you have that look people get when they're standing at the edge of something significant." The older woman smiled. "Wear something that makes you feel powerful. And remember, you're interviewing him as much as he's pitching to you." Camille went home and stood in front of her closet, which contained exactly 2 outfits that qualified as nice. The interview suit she was tired of wearing, and a deep emerald dress her mother had sent for her birthday. She chose the dress, applied minimal makeup, left her hair natural and curly rather than straightened into submission. When she looked in the mirror, she saw someone caught between versions of herself, the professional candidate she'd been trying to become, and the dancer who'd moved through rain without caring who watched. The restaurant was tucked down a quiet street, its entrance marked only by a small bronze plaque. Camille gave her name to the host, who led her through a space designed to make wealth look understated. Low lighting, tables spaced for privacy, art on the walls that probably cost more than she'd make in a year. Andre sat at a corner table, and he stood when she approached. He traded his coat for a dark sweater and slacks, looking slightly less intimidating but no less expensive. "You came," he said. "You didn't seem like someone accustomed to being told no," Camille replied, sitting across from him. "I'm not, but I would have accepted it from you." He poured her water from the bottle on the table. "Thank you for giving me this chance to explain properly." A server appeared, described specials in rapid Korean that Camille only half followed, then disappeared to give them time. "Before we talk business," Camille said, "I need to understand something." "Why me?" "There are models with vitiligo already working in the industry, successful ones. Why track down a waitress in Seoul instead of hiring someone established?" Andre was quiet for a moment, and Camille recognized the pause, not hesitation, but the careful consideration of how much truth to share. "Because the models you're referring to are working within a system that tolerates their difference as long as they perform conventional beauty everywhere else. They fit except for one distinctive feature, which makes them interesting but not threatening." He met her eyes directly. "You don't fit anywhere. Your presence demands that spaces reshape themselves around you rather than the other way around. That's what I saw in the video. That's what I need." That's a pretty way of saying I'm unmarketable by traditional standards. That's an honest way of saying traditional standards are dying, and I need someone authentic enough to help bury them. The server returned, and they ordered. Camille chose carefully, aware that every gesture in this conversation was being evaluated, even as she was evaluating him. "Tell me about your company," she said once they were alone again. "Not the press release version. The real version." Andre leaned back, and something in his posture shifted. Less corporate armor, more genuine exhaustion. "My father built the agency from nothing. When he died, I was 25 and convinced I could do it better. Faster. Bigger. I expanded to 3 continents in 4 years, signed major contracts, put us on the map. Sounds successful. It was, until I realized I'd built something soulless. Every campaign started looking the same. Every model could be swapped for another. We became exactly what I swore we wouldn't be. A factory producing beautiful emptiness." He paused. 6 months ago, we lost our biggest client to a competitor who took a risk on an unconventional campaign. It worked. We tried to copy their approach, but you can't manufacture authenticity. The market could tell we were chasing trends instead of setting them. And now you're desperate enough to gamble on someone with no modeling experience. Now I'm clear-headed enough to recognize that experience in a broken system isn't an asset. It's a liability. Andre's intensity focused on her again. "I don't want someone who knows how to perform beauty. I want someone who embodies it without performance." Camille felt the pull of his vision, the seductive possibility that maybe this time would be different. But she'd felt hope before, and she knew how it could corrode into disappointment. "What exactly are you offering?" she asked. "Specifics, not grand statements. A 2-year contract as the primary face of Kim International's rebrand. You'll be featured in our main campaigns across all markets: Seoul, New York, Paris, Milan. Photo shoots, runway shows, brand partnerships. 50% creative approval on any project featuring you. 20% profit participation in campaigns you headline. And a starting salary that would make your previous job offers look insulting." He named a figure that made Camille's breath catch. It was obscene, life-changing, the kind of money that could eliminate her student loans, support her mother, build the future she'd studied for but couldn't access. "That's generous to the point of suspicious," she said carefully. "That's market rate for someone who's going to save my company. I'm investing in you because I believe you're worth it. But I need you to believe it too. I don't know if I can do what you're asking. I'm not a model. I don't know how to move in front of cameras the way professionals do. You moved in front of dozens of strangers while it rained, and it was more compelling than anything I've seen from trained models in years." Andre leaned forward. "I'm not asking you to become someone else. I'm asking you to be exactly who you were in that video. Unfiltered, honest, undeniable." Their food arrived, elegant presentations that looked almost too beautiful to eat. Camille picked up her fork, considering. "Why should I trust you?" she asked. "Everyone who's rejected me had reasons that sounded logical too. They were protecting their brands, maintaining their standards. You're doing the same thing, just from a different angle." "You shouldn't trust me," Andre said bluntly. "You should trust the contract my lawyers will draft, the creative control clause you'll have in writing, and your own ability to walk away if this becomes something you don't believe in. And if I say no, you'll just move on to the next viral sensation? If you say no, I'll respect it. And yes, I'll find another approach because my company's survival depends on change. But I don't think I'll find another you." They ate in silence for a few minutes, and Camille appreciated that he didn't fill the space with more persuasion. He'd made his case. Now he was waiting. "I need time," she finally said. "This is my life, my image, my identity you're asking me to put on international display. I can't make this decision over dinner, no matter how good the food is." "How much time?" "A week, maybe more." Andre nodded. "Fair enough. Can I ask what would make you more comfortable with this? What would shift this from feeling like exploitation to opportunity?" Camille considered. "Prove to me that you see me as a person, not a strategy. Show me that this matters to you beyond profit margins." "How do I do that?" "I don't know. But if you're as smart as your reputation suggests, you'll figure it out." Something that might have been respect flickered across his features. Okay, 1 week. I'll prove it. They finished dinner with easier conversation. He asked about her time in university, her experience living in Seoul, her relationship with her mother. She asked about his transition from business school to running an international company, the pressure of maintaining his father's legacy, the isolation of making decisions that affected hundreds of employees. By the time they left the restaurant, Camille had a clearer sense of who Andre Kim was beneath the calculated exterior. Someone driven by ghosts and expectations, trying to build something meaningful from the ruins of his father's vision. He called her a car, refused to let her take the subway home. "Thank you for tonight," he said as they waited for the driver. "For listening. For considering. Thank you for being honest," Camille replied. "I think." She rode home through Seoul's nighttime streets, watching the city blur past, and wondered if she was brave enough to step into visibility after spending so long fighting to be seen. The week that followed felt suspended in amber. Slow and strange, every moment waited with the decision Camille hadn't made yet. Andre kept his distance but made his presence known in small, deliberate ways. The second day, a package arrived at the restaurant. Not jewelry or expensive gifts that would feel like bribery, but a leather-bound journal with a note in precise handwriting. For documenting the considerations. Whatever you decide, the thinking matters. Okay. The third day, he showed up at Mrs. Song's restaurant during the lunch rush and sat at the counter, eating bibimbap and working on his laptop like any other customer. He didn't approach Camille, didn't interrupt her work. Just existed in her space without demanding anything. "He's persistent," Mrs. Song observed, refilling his water. "But not pushy. There's a difference." The fourth day brought an email with the subject line, "Transparency." Inside was a detailed financial breakdown of his company's situation. Losses, projections, the specific ways his business was hemorrhaging relevance. Numbers that would typically be confidential, shared without request. The message simply read, "You should know exactly what you'd be stepping into. No surprises." Camille sat in her apartment that night, reading through the financial documents with the analytical skills she'd honed in university. The situation was worse than he'd initially suggested. His company wasn't just declining, it was on the edge of collapse. Within 18 months, without significant change, Kim International would close. The revelation should have made her run. Instead, it made her think. Her phone rang. Her mother, calling for their nightly check-in that had become routine since the video went viral. "He sent me his company's financials," Camille said without preamble. "He's in real trouble, Mama. If this rebrand doesn't work, he loses everything. So the stakes are high for both of you. That's what worries me. What if I fail? What if I'm not enough to save his company? And then I've attached my name and face to something that crashes publicly." Her mother was quiet for a moment. "Baby, let me ask you something. What's the worst that could happen if you try and it doesn't work? I become known for failure. I prove everyone right who said I wasn't marketable. And what's the worst that happens if you don't try?" Camille closed her eyes. "I spend the rest of my life wondering if I let fear steal my chance." There's your answer. But knowing the answer and acting on it were different animals entirely. Camille spent the fifth day walking through Seoul, revisiting the places that had become familiar over her years there. The university campus where she'd studied, the coffee shop where she'd celebrated graduating, the Han River path where she'd walked after each rejection, trying to metabolize disappointment. She ended up at the spot near Gangnam Station where she danced in the rain. Someone had left flowers there, tucked against the wall where the guitarist usually sat. A small handwritten sign in Korean read, "Thank you for reminding us that beauty is honest." Camille stood there as evening fell, watching people rush past on their way to somewhere important, and she thought about visibility, about how she'd spent months trying to make herself palatable enough to be hired, shrinking herself to fit spaces that didn't want her anyway, and how one moment of complete honesty, dancing without armor, moving without apology, had reached more people than all her careful professional presentation combined. Maybe that was the answer. Maybe the risk wasn't in being seen. The risk was in hiding. On the sixth day, she called Andre. "I want to meet again," she said, "but not at a fancy restaurant. Somewhere real." He didn't hesitate. Tell me where. She chose a pojamika, a street tent restaurant that served soju and fried snacks to students and salarymen. The kind of place where plastic stools wobbled and conversations got loud and nobody cared about appearances. Andre arrived looking slightly out of place in his designer clothes but willing to be uncomfortable. They sat across from each other on unstable stools, steam from the cooking tent fogging the plastic windows. I've been thinking about what you said, Camille started, about proving this matters to you beyond profit. And you've been showing up, not performing, not pitching, just present. That means something. She accepted the soju the Ajumma poured, raised her glass. But I need you to understand what you're actually asking of me. Tell me, you want me to be the face of your brand, to put my image, my identity, my body on international display, to be scrutinized and analyzed and probably criticized by millions of people who'll have opinions about whether I deserve to be visible. Her voice stayed steady, but her hands shook slightly. For you, this is a business risk. For me, this is my entire sense of self on the line. Andre met her eyes, and she saw something shift in his expression. Recognition, maybe, of the fundamental imbalance in what they each stood to lose. You're right, he said quietly. I've been focused on what I need from you. I haven't fully considered the cost of what I'm asking. So consider it now. Because if I do this, I need to know you understand that I'm not just an asset or a strategy. I'm a person making myself vulnerable in ways you can't fully comprehend. What do you need from me? Andre asked. To make this bearable. To make it feel less like sacrifice and more like partnership. Camille had been thinking about this for days. Creative control isn't enough. I need equal voice in how I'm represented. I need the right to say no to anything that feels exploitative. I need you to commit that if this works, if I somehow help save your company, you'll use that platform to create opportunities for other people who don't fit traditional molds. Done. I'm not finished. I also need transparency. If something's not working, if the campaigns are failing, if the public reception is negative, I need to know immediately. No protecting me from bad news. No managing my emotions like I'm fragile. I can handle truth. I can't handle being blindsided. I can do that. And one more thing. Camille paused, gathering courage for the most important ask. I need you to promise that you see me. Not the opportunity one represent. Not the problem I solve. Me, Camille. The woman who dances in the rain and speaks 3 languages and graduated with honors but still waitresses because the world is unfair. If you can't see that person, if all you see is what I can do for your company, then this won't work. Andre was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching her face. When he spoke, his voice had lost its business polish. I see you, he said. I saw you in that video before I knew your name or your story. I saw someone refusing to be diminished by a world that tried to make her smaller. And I've seen you this past week. Careful and thoughtful and unwilling to be dazzled by money or opportunity. You're remarkable, Camille. Not because of what you can do for me. Because of who you are despite everything that's tried to break you. Something in Camille's chest cracked open. Not breaking. Blooming. Okay, she said. Okay, I'll do it. I'll sign your contract. I'll be the face of your rebrand. I'll take the risk. The smile that crossed Andre's face was the first genuinely unguarded expression she'd seen from him. Relief and hope mixed with something that looked like respect. Thank you, he said. I won't waste this. I promise you that. They toasted with soju, and Camille felt the weight of her decision settle into her bones. Terror and excitement tangled together, impossible to separate. The next 2 weeks moved with dizzying speed. Lawyers drafted contracts that Camille read 3 times before signing, making sure every protection she'd asked for was embedded in legal language. Andre's team flew in from New York. Photographers, creative directors, brand strategists who treated her like a puzzle to solve until Andre shut it down. She's not a problem that needs fixing, he said sharply during one meeting. Build the campaign around who she is, not who you think she should be. The shift in approach was immediate and disorienting. Instead of trying to fit Camille into existing templates, they asked her questions. What made her feel powerful? What stories did she want to tell? How did she want to be seen? Honestly, Camille said during one creative session, I want people to see me dancing in the rain and think, that's beautiful without any qualifiers. Not beautiful despite her condition, or beautiful in an unconventional way. Just beautiful. Period. The creative director, a sharp woman named Helen from the Paris office, smiled. Then that's what we'll give them. The first photo shoot was scheduled for a crisp October morning at an industrial space in Seoul. Camille arrived before dawn, her stomach churning with anxiety. Mrs. Song had closed the restaurant for the day to come support her, and her mother had flown in from Virginia the night before. You've got this, baby? Her mother whispered, squeezing her hand before the shoot began. You've always had this. The photography team had transformed the industrial space into something raw and honest. Exposed brick, natural light, minimal props. No elaborate costumes or heavy makeup. Just Camille in simple clothing that moved well, her hair natural, her skin untouched by filters or corrections. Andre stood off to the side, watching but not interfering. Their eyes met across the space, and he nodded once. Permission, encouragement, trust. The photographer, a quiet Korean man named Juno, approached with gentle energy. I've seen your video probably 100 times, he said in Korean. I'm not interested in recreating it. I want to see what happens when you move without rain, without music. Just you and light and space. Can you do that? Camille took a breath. I can try. The first hour was awkward. She felt hyper-aware of the cameras, the watching team, the weight of expectations. Her movements came out stiff, performative, wrong. Andre called for a break. He walked over, spoke quietly so only she could hear. You're thinking too much about what we want to see. Stop performing for us. Dance for yourself like you did that night. We're just borrowing the moment. Camille closed her eyes, breathed, found the place inside herself where movement lived before thought. When she opened her eyes, she didn't look at the cameras. She looked at the light falling through the industrial windows, the way it painted shadows on the concrete floor. And she moved. Not choreography, not poses, just honest response to music only she could hear. Her body remembered how to speak when words failed. Sharp where she felt strong, fluid where she felt free, still where she felt certain. The camera shutters clicked like percussion, but she stopped hearing them, stopped thinking about being watched, just existed in her skin, in this space, in this moment of allowing herself to be completely visible. When they finally wrapped, 6 hours had passed. Camille was exhausted, exhilarated, wrung out in the best possible way. Juno showed her some of the shots on his camera, and Camille barely recognized herself. Not because she looked different, but because she looked like she felt powerful, unapologetic, undeniably present. These are going to change everything, Helen said, reviewing the images with barely contained excitement. This is exactly what the industry needs right now. The campaign launched 3 weeks later across Seoul, billboards in Gangnam and Hongdae, digital displays in subway stations, print ads in major fashion magazines. Camille's face, her body, her story blown up to impossible sizes. The tagline, which she'd helped write, was simple: real recognizes real. The public response was immediate and polarizing. Some people called it revolutionary, praised Kim International for finally showcasing authentic beauty. Others criticized it as a publicity stunt, accused Andre of exploiting Camille's difference for profit. Think pieces debated whether the campaign was empowering or opportunistic. Camille read everything the first few days, then stopped. She couldn't control how people interpreted her visibility. She could only control whether she remained true to why she'd agreed to this in the first place. On a cold November morning, Camille stood in front of a billboard near Gangnam Station, the same area where she'd danced in the rain months earlier. Her image looked down at the morning rush, 30 feet tall and impossible to ignore. Her mother stood beside her, tears streaming down her face. Look at you, baby. Look at what you've become. I'm the same person I always was, Camille said softly. No, you're the person you always were, finally being seen. Andre approached from behind, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. He'd been in Seoul for the past month, overseeing the launch personally. The distance between them had shifted from purely professional to something more complicated. Late-night strategy sessions that turned into conversations about childhood and dreams, stolen moments of laughter between the chaos of the rebrand. "The Paris office called," he said, handing her a coffee. "The campaign's getting international attention. Vogue wants an interview. Harper's Bazaar wants a cover shoot." "That's good for the company," Camille said. "It's good for you too. This is your platform now. You get to decide what to do with it." Camille sipped her coffee, still staring at her billboard self. A group of high school students walked past, one of them pointing up at the image and saying something excited in Korean. They didn't recognize Camille standing there in her normal clothes. She was just another person on the street. She liked the duality of it, being seen and unseen simultaneously, having visibility on her own terms. "What happens next?" she asked. Andre moved to stand beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "We keep building, keep pushing, keep showing the industry that there's another way to define beauty." "And personally?" The question slipped out before Camille could stop it. "What happens with us?" He turned to look at her, and something vulnerable flickered across his features. "I don't know. I've never mixed business with anything else. I don't know how to navigate this." "Neither do I," Camille admitted. "But I'm tired of playing it safe. Tired of making myself smaller to fit other people's comfort." "So we figure it out as we go?" "Yeah, we figure it out." Her mother cleared her throat diplomatically. "I'm going to go find Mrs. Song. She wanted to visit that tea shop in Insadong. You two, take your time." After she left, Camille and Andre stood together in the morning cold, watching Seoul wake up around them. Somewhere in the crowd, someone else was probably being told they didn't fit. Someone else was shrinking themselves, hiding their light, accepting the world's narrow definitions. But up on that billboard, Camille's image reminded them and reminded her that visibility wasn't something to be granted by gatekeepers. It was something to be claimed. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for seeing me when I was invisible." "Thank you," Andre replied, "for teaching me to see clearly again." The city rushed past, indifferent to their small moment of transformation. But Camille felt it anyway, the shift from surviving to thriving, from hiding to being undeniably, gloriously herself. And for the first time in her adult life, she believed she deserved to take up space. Soul lovers, if you've made it this far in Camille's story, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below telling me what country you're watching from and what time it is where you are right now. And if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss when I drop more incredible stories like this one. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let me finish Camille's journey. 3 months after the campaign launched, Kim International stock had stabilized and begun climbing. Brand partnerships flooded in, not just fashion, but beauty companies, wellness brands, even tech companies wanting to associate with the authenticity Camille represented. But more important than the business metrics were the messages Camille received daily. Young women with vitiligo sending photos, saying they'd stopped hiding their skin. Men writing about showing the campaign to their daughters, teaching them that beauty had no single definition. Parents thanking her for giving their children a visible example of difference being celebrated rather than merely tolerated. Camille sat in Andre's Seoul office. She had her own office now, 2 doors down, reading through the latest batch of messages. Some made her cry. All of them reminded her why visibility mattered. Andre appeared in her doorway, leaning against the frame with that almost smile he wore when he was trying not to show how pleased he was about something. "What?" Camille asked. "The New York Times wants to do a profile, not just about the campaign, about you, your journey, your vision for what comes next." "And what does come next?" He walked into her office, sat on the edge of her desk. Over the past months, the formality between them had eroded into something warmer, more complicated. They hadn't defined it, hadn't rushed it, just let it unfold naturally like her career had. "I've been thinking," Andre said. About expansion. Not just using your image, but your voice. What if we created a division focused specifically on redefining industry standards? You'd lead it, build the team, set the vision. Camille set down her phone. You want me to run part of your company? I want you to build something that outlasts any single campaign. Something that changes how the entire industry thinks about representation. The offer was staggering, terrifying. Exactly the kind of opportunity she'd stopped believing existed. Can I think about it? Take all the time you need. But Camille. He reached out, his hand covering hers on the desk. Whatever you decide, I want you to know. This stopped being just business for me a long time ago. Her heart kicked against her ribs. Andre, I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. I just needed you to know. You've changed my company. You've changed how I see this industry. And you've changed me. Made me remember why I started this in the first place. Camille turned her hand over, lacing her fingers through his. You gave me visibility. But more than that, you gave me space to be visible on my own terms. That's the gift. They sat like that for a moment, hands linked, the Seoul skyline spreading out beyond the windows. Everything had changed. Everything was still changing. That evening, Camille met her mother and Mrs. Song for dinner at the restaurant where she'd waitressed just months earlier. The owner had framed the viral video screenshot and hung it on the wall. Not as decoration, but as reminder. How does it feel? Mrs. Song asked. Being the face everyone recognizes now? Camille considered. Strange. Good. Sometimes overwhelming. But mostly it feels like finally being allowed to exist without apology. That's all any of us want, her mother said, raising her glass. To exist fully, to be seen clearly, to take up space without shame. They toasted to that. To transformation. To the courage of visibility. To the long journey from invisible to undeniable. Later, walking home through Seoul's nighttime streets, Camille passed the spot where she'd danced in the rain. Someone had created a small memorial there. Flowers, notes, photos people had taken of themselves dancing in that same spot. A movement born from one moment of honest vulnerability. She stood there watching people pass, some recognizing her and smiling, others moving by without a second glance. Both felt right. She didn't need to be recognized by everyone. She just needed to recognize herself. Her phone buzzed. Andre, dinner tomorrow? Not business. Just us. She smiled, typed back. Just us sounds perfect. Camille pocketed her phone and started the walk home, her reflection catching in storefront windows. A woman who'd stopped shrinking, stopped hiding, stopped accepting the world's limitations as her own. The city lights painted her skin in shifting colors, highlighting the patterns that had once felt like barriers and now felt like maps. Maps of everywhere she'd been, everywhere she was going. And for the first time in her life, she couldn't wait to see where visibility would take her next.